The University of the Western Cape, considered the birthplace of the student struggle in Cape Town. A group of young people inspired by the sacrifices of Hector Peterson and others in Soweto on the 16th June 1976. It eventually led to the United Democratic Front and the mass democratic movement of the 1980s.
It happened in the second semester of 76. Of course, the time the students started the uprising in Soweto, we were already, I think, on holiday as the university. When students came from all over the country back to campus, and especially the guys from Joburg and so on, they, I think, in a sense, asked the SRC, how is UWC going to respond?
Llewellyn McMaster is a former Dean of Students at Stellenbosch University and was a first-year UWC student in 1976. He says he was politicized by student leaders like Johnny Issel, who later went on to become a founding member of the UDF.
UWC now in a position, students want to go back to class, but now the communities, the schools are out in boycott and things are happening. And so again, debate, it's always debate on campus, boycott or not boycott and stuff like that. And he stood up and said, how can I go and sit in a class? Because if I do that, it feels like I write with the blood of the school children. And for me, I remember that was, wow. All of a sudden we were out again,
It's here on Modedam Road, now called Robert Sobukwe Drive, where UWC students would clash with apartheid police. It was a focal point for protest and a place where young activists earned their mettle.
You saw the brutality of the police, they did not care about, our struggle and why we're struggling. They were there to maintain law and order, as it was called that time. And they had a saying, that we've got place for all UWC students in jail.
But there was some opposition for all-out protest action from university students. UWC rector in 1976, Richard van der Ross, was widely criticized for not actively supporting students. But looking back, he says his hands were tied, and he wholeheartedly supported students in their cause.
I supported them, but quietly. I was never a prominent political activist. I went to get my education. People at the University of the Western Cape who were active political people. I was never one of them. I went there at the bloody head of the place, man. There was nooit een student daar nie. I went there as the rector and I was the boss, and I ran it as quietly as I could. I went there to be the head, and I was the head. And as the head, I couldn't be political. I did what I believed the university should do.
He was not always treated with respect. I mean, in the 80s, I remember, being thrown with tomatoes and eggs. There was a nice picture that somebody reposted when we were planning our 80s reunion, how we just, avoided egg hitting him in the face. But reading his book also about that experience made me realize, he had his own struggles, but he also had a deep understanding, because somebody asked him, he says, are you not worried, being hit by an egg thrown by students? He said, in the greater scheme of things, paraphrasing, what is that, being hit by an egg, in comparison with people who's given their lives and who's been jailed for freedom. And that for me says, you can differ from him, but he had an understanding that he had a role to play. Now, if you just look at some of the pictures, how he was there, involved with students, something that you don't find necessarily in today's, because again it's different, the student protest, but he was not afraid to be there.
McMaster says there are similarities between the struggle of students in the 1970s and 80s to those of today. He says movements like the Fees Must Fall movement shows where previous campaigns had failed.
The students, the current activists, has shown us that we have not done enough. And at the same time, they go a bit deeper than us. We wanted, or we fought against apartheid. That was, and we understood apartheid, had its roots further down in colonization and stuff like that. But it was not really so much part of our vocabulary. The current generation say, let's talk about decolonization. Let's talk about what happened also in 1994, because clearly the political liberation and freedom was not enough.
McMaster and other activists of his time say their fight was for a just and democratic South Africa, but he adds the fight for full economic emancipation is far from over. Lester Kivet, Cape Town.